All right. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. Thank you for joining us this morning for the first HR clinic at AmCham. We have developed this platform in order for us to create a place where the HR practitioners and leaders within AmCham can come together, share experiences, share knowledge, and also drive thought leadership within the practice of HR. I'm Eva Wadome. I'm the Membership and Strategic Partnerships here at AmCham, and I'll be your host today. We find that this platform is not only timely, but very important. The role of HR is really the interlocutor between the people in the organization and the strategic objectives of the organization. No other time in history has this been even more important than in the past 2 years, where organizations have been rethinking how they will foster talent, how they would deliver services and strengthen their organizations through forward thinking. And at the center of that has been the HR and HR strategy. The issues are really complex, including employee support, leadership development, but also strategic partnerships across the organization. So bringing various sides of the organization together and driving the key objective of the organization. Today, we have a fantastic group of leaders with us. I'll just quickly give you a flavor of the experience that we have here today. We have Folake, a certified executive coach and regional HR director, Sub-Saharan Africa for Oracle. She has 23 years under her belt as management consulting and advisory in the oil and gas, telco, and information technology space. Folake is a seasoned corporate executive with extensive experience in the field of international human resource management, talent management, strategic business partnerships, and organizational development in leading global multinationals. We also have with us Hedrick. She is the administration manager at Dentons, Hamilton and Harrison and Mathews. Hedrick is a human resource practitioner with over 20 years of experience. She's currently the administration manager at Dentons, where she's responsible for where her responsibilities include developing and implementing the firm's human resource policy, procedures, and stakeholder management. She's keen in understanding the critical roles of human resource management in dynamic organizations that need to enable an environment that drives inclusive teams. We also have David, Global Chief People and Culture Officer at LivingGoods. David is a seasoned business and human capital management leader, having provided strategic thought leadership direction as a human resource director at some of the leading global multinationals, including Unilever, Standard Bank in South Africa, Coca-Cola, Africa Development Bank, and has recently come into his role as a global director for the people and culture at Oxfam International. He has over 20 years under his belt, and will have, I think, really fantastic experience to share with us. Last but not least, of course, we have Emily. She's a coach and the founder of Rise and Learn Global. Rise and Learn is our principal partner in the HR clinic. And we thank Emily and her team for helping us develop this platform. Emily has over 15 years as a leader, as an HR leader, coach, and she is the local partner for Ericsson Coaching International. She's also currently the global director for International Coaching Federation. So with that, I think you realize we have over 60 years of experience collectively on this call, and a fantastic panel. Emily will be facilitating the conversation today. And with that, I will hand over to you, Emily.
Thank you very much, Eva, and good morning, everyone. So as Eva just mentioned, our conversation today will be leading in times of crisis, and very shortly we'll be hearing from the panelists who've just been introduced. So the global pandemic has no doubt affected all of us. It has affected businesses, it has affected, employees, and even at home. In Kenya alone, over 730,000 jobs were lost last year. And as a result of the lockdown and reduced economic activity, we found ourselves in very difficult situations. Businesses closed. Some employees had to live with pay cuts, and others with no pay at all. So really, when you talk about a crisis, it's the global pandemic in itself was just one of the crises that we had to find ourselves living in, that it wasn't just localized, it was actually an international phenomenon. It was just something that really moved everybody to rethink and again to come together as a community, whether locally or internationally, to see how do we address this. Now, in the conversation today, we are going to be discussing the responsibility of various leaders during difficult times. How do you turn adversity into an advantage? And again, we'll also look at how have these challenges shaped us and how we think now, how we're going to do things even in the future. But before that, I just want to share with you a little bit of my own experience as an entrepreneur and in my own business. Now, 2020 for us was the year. We started on a high. We were like, this is the year we are doing great things, until March happened. And I say March because we were right in the middle of organizing 2 major international events. 2 weeks into that, there was cancellations after the announcement of the lockdown. We had put in money and all that had to be canceled. We lost quite a huge amount of revenue. We had cancellation from our partners. And again, because it was a global crisis, then you have nobody to blame. You just have to bear the brunt and deal with it. So what to do after that? At the end of the day, for us as a business, we realized that we had over-relied so much on the training and events, which was our core business. But then after that particular time, we had then to rethink and go back to the drawing board. And actually what we realized is that we had 2 other sides of the businesses that we had to go to. And believe it or not, this is the 2 sides of our businesses, the outsourcing and leveraging on technology and the e-learning. This is what kept our lights on. Because training and events, it's a business that's totally died. There was nobody going out, there was no conferences, there was no training, yet this was our core business. So even as a business owner, for me, what I learned was that, the gains of diversification actually came to the fore, because this is what kept our lights on, just being able to go back and say, what else can we do our business? How do we re-strategize? Because the strategies you had before didn't work anymore. So it was difficult, it was tough. We're lucky we survived. And yes, interestingly, it was still one of our best years. But I think it's because we took the lessons. We are not where we wanted to be at the beginning, but I think we picked out some lessons. And I think from my own observation as well, I have worked with leaders who really showed up during the times of crisis. And one of the things that I've noticed for those that made it, for those that survived, and for those that managed the crisis well, leaders showed up during that time. They were there, they were present, irrespective of how difficult the conversations were. So one of the really values of a leader during a time of crisis is to show up and to communicate. I think visible presence is so important during these difficult times. And the second piece is being able to put people first. We had a lot of organizations looking at wellness programs. How do we keep our employees safe? And even in the midst of managing this crisis. So that's really critical. We recognize that at the end of the day, it's not about just the profits, but people first. And again, also from a business angle, being flexible. If you had a plan A, you now have to think about plan B. And sometimes plan B will not work. You have to go to your C. I just shared with you my experience on what happened in our case. And I think the last two elements I just want to share is really being able to leverage on our teams, because what we realized during these times is even as a leader, you cannot do everything on your own. You cannot be just, nobody is a superhuman. So very, very important, just being able to leverage on the strengths of the various teams and even including them in terms of coming up with how to manage in times of, in those difficult times. And of course, I can't overemphasize the communication, because what happens in times of crisis, a lot of people run to communities, associations. They want to belong, they want to hear, they want to be informed of what's going on. And I think that's really one of the most critical roles that leaders play. And then there is the issue of being resilient, not giving up, not panicking and just being all over the place. I think that has worked really well from a business angle, being able to push on and find solutions. I think that's an important kind of key value as far as leadership is concerned in these times. And just being as authentic as you can, because leaders don't have all the answers. Yes, in times of crisis, that's when the real leaders show up, and they need to be at the forefront. And to come home to the HR space, the HR leaders have been at the forefront, just like the way we had our medical doctors, nurses in the public health, they were at the forefront. So at the workplace, I do see that HR was actually the frontline service people. And we also had our own challenges in terms of how do we continue to support the business, and then there was the people element. And I think in the conversation that follows, we are going to be hearing from Folake, we will hear from David, we will hear from Hedrick, what their experiences were. And at this particular juncture, I just want to pause there and welcome them. Welcome David, Folake, and Hedrick, and allow each one of them to say hello. I know Eva introduced them, but it would be nice to say a word from them before we go into the panel conversation. You can start with you, David.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you on this call, and excited to be getting into a conversation to talk about what really, really is a business opportunity, an opportunity to build resilience in our organizations as we navigate what has been an absolute challenge for the whole world and, of course, for the business world. So looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, David. Hedrick?
Good morning, everyone. Just to let you know, I'm very, very excited to be on this call, to be excited to be on this conversation. Looking forward to sharing insights of what we went through, how we navigated, how we have gone through the situation as it was, and see what we can learn from each other.
Thank you. Folake?
I always say that the most powerful professional in the room is the one that is both self-aware and intentional. So today it's really about learning and putting heads together, because I don't think we claim to be experts, putting heads together to really see how we can continue to be intentional. Karibu sana, everybody.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me go to the first question, which is, what have you observed when it comes to responding to a crisis? And how did you navigate through the challenges at the onset of this pandemic? We can start with Hedrick.
For me, my observation, the first one was there was a serious disruption of business. And the disruption was in terms of operations, in terms of the operational responses. There was anxiety. People did not know how long this situation will be here with us. We didn't know how to navigate it. And especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, it was new. Nobody had gone through this before. Yes, as leaders, we always think of the VUCA. Things are volatile, the environment is uncertain, the environment is complex, it is ambiguous. All this is in our minds. But COVID threw a real spanner in the works, and we had to come up with ways to just go through that. So the anxiety that people had, the stakeholders really, all the leaders, we are not sure how long it will take to resolve the matter. That was big. And then of course, there's the financial impact. Businesses were affected, and we had to come up with ways to just spring back and get going. And another key aspect, one thing that came up for me was wellness. The wellness of the people, the wellness of the team became critical for me as one of the things to deal with. And then how did we navigate? I would say, as you have said earlier, communicate, communicate, communicate. This cannot be overemphasized. And this, as we are thinking communication, we also had to have in mind employee relations. How are we going? Is everybody all right? Then we came up with a system where we gave regular updates to the stakeholders, all stakeholders actually. We had a global portal where we had COVID responses, and all our clients, all our employees, all stakeholders, both internal and external, could log on, know what's going on. This was one of our ways to navigate and just make sure everybody is comfortable, at least as far as can be. Then we came up with policies and guidelines, because suddenly working from home was a thing, and a big one at that. Obviously, we had been thinking about it, but now it happened overnight. Things had to change, and yeah, so we had to come up with policies with regard to IT, for example. How do you handle the equipment you're allowed to take home? How do you deal with safety and security? How do I monitor productivity? How do I make sure that confidential information remains confidential? And as we are doing all this, we also had to make sure that we are balancing well-being. So yes, we are checking productivity, we are managing that, but well-being had to be at the forefront too. And then we came up with regular training so that we are flexible. While you're at home, working from home, we check in on each other, just for mental wellness as well. So we know that everybody, yes, we are not seeing each other regularly, but we are in touch with each other. So those are some of the things we did to navigate through.
Thanks, Hedrick. Let's hear from Folake, and then David will follow.
I said at the beginning, Emily, that, and of course, Hedrick, David, and I have hobnobbed on this. It's easy to sound like a team of experts at the moment, but the truth about it is that, to your question, at the onset of the pandemic, it was an internal pandemic. It was chaotic. We were all running helter-skelter, wondering, my gosh, how do we keep this all together? And I won't duplicate, of course, what Hedrick has said from a best practice point of view. That is how we then evolve. But at the onset, I think one of the important things, apart from bringing the stakeholders, the regular stakeholders together, and I'm talking, who needs to be part of that team, let's bring together, HR, facilities, the crisis team quickly had to get their acts together, local leadership, executive leadership, everybody had to get together. But one of the things that we also had to do, so that we don't panic everybody else that's looking up to us as leaders, we had to remain calm. We had to at least try and remain calm. And I don't mean that by taking Lexotan and Aleve and Panadol and things like that, although those helped as well, during that period, because you had to find inner calm, first of all, as a manager, and therefore, how do you calm the team? How do you, keep building the vision of, okay, you know what, this is really just temporary. We didn't know that at the time, how temporary or not temporary it was going to be. But we had to keep talking about, guys, we're still in business. We still have to be productive, and so on and so forth. We as managers had to be courageous. We didn't know exactly what was going on, but hey, we still had to find our way through. We still had to draw from our own colleagues, to say, oh my gosh, how are we going to pass on that level of calm, and how do we pass on that level of courage to our own teams, and most especially, even the crisis team that was meeting very regularly at the time. And we had to find a structure. We had to find some sort of structure around the chaos. With remote working, oh my gosh, you know how that is. And I'm sure that we're still going to talk about it afterwards, but Is IT completely clued up? Are we ready for remote working? Do we have the tools? Do we have the processes? And processes just means, are people clued up as to how to get on Zoom, how to get on Microsoft Teams, how to get on Google, handouts, and how do we teach that? And a lot of what also helped me at the onset, even though it was all chaotic, was really as a leader passing on that positivity. How do I help my team? How do I help my colleagues? How do I help my boss in some regard to be confident and positive? What are the words that you are speaking? My meetings became not just 1 hour of, so where are we? Tick the box. What next? The first 30 minutes was, how are you doing? Checking in. Are you okay, Janet? Are you okay, Emily? Hedrick, what's going on in your life? And we stopped from whenever, just before the pandemic, if you heard a noise or you heard a child's cry, everybody sort of froze. But now as a leader, you needed to be more understanding, more empathetic. If a dog starts to bark, you should be the first to smile and say, oh gosh, is your dog hungry? If a child starts to cry, it's like, bring the child, carry, pat the child, and then the meeting is just about the child for 2 minutes. We needed to be empathetic. We needed to be a bit more, we needed to be human. If in the beginning we were not even doing that. So at the beginning it was chaotic, but these are the things that I believe that really helped us to gain a bit more staying power and build a bit more resilience within the team as well. Thank you, Emily. I'm done speaking.
Beautiful.
Yes, so just adding on to the voices of Hedrick and Folake. No, I must say, more or less similar lessons, but it's interesting also how contexts can be different in this regard. But let me put it this way. I think the crisis has been a real crash mini MBA on leadership, soft leadership in that regard for all of us. And I can assure you we'll never be the same again. And probably we shall be better and better as we move forward. But what is very clear is that we all had to rethink and reimagine how we're going to be doing our businesses. In my organization, one of the first things we had to think about was what success really looked like. And so interesting how we started reviewing our strategies in a manner that allowed us as much flexibility as possible. I've never seen so much scenario planning like we've done over the last 18 months, to the extent that actually we did not mind making pivots every 3 months. And that was the reality we had to deal with. And that really helped the teams very well to focus on what really mattered at a particular time. So we built in a lot of flexibility in our goal setting for our teams, even as those goals still remain smart. But one other thing which was a big shift, and I think it's going to be another powerful invention in our performance management process, is recognizing contribution or input more than just performance outcomes. Because we realize that our teams, especially in our case, community health workers out there in the field, exposed to COVID because they are moving door to door, you had to appreciate the fact that, by the way, so many things, so many variables were out of their control. But recognizing their contributions, and fortunately we were able to track it, was a very helpful way of really incentivizing people for the effort they put in. But again, the reality also is that with the teams that were dispersed across countries, you could not see them, you could not meet them. We now realize how much we needed to trust these teams. And to a great extent, we allow them to self-organize. We try as much as possible to walk away from the traditional structures and created cross-functional self-organized teams to do what they need to do best. And we also allowed some flexibility, across countries to say, look, the context of this country, Burkina Faso, is different from the context in Uganda, is different from the US. So you guys think about what gives you superior results. And it doesn't have to be a one size fits all. And that level of empowerment and trust that people will do what is in the best interest of the organization really worked out. But very importantly, we started realizing how the segmentation or understanding your employee segments really is very important. Just, thinking about missionaries and mercenaries and misfits, clearly we saw those missionaries, those people who love to maintain the old status quo, stickler to process etc. And we saw also the mercenaries really asking, challenging and really out to make sure we solve problems. And of course, the misfits who really were disoriented and even left the organization. But I think we spent a lot of time investing in the mercenaries, those disruptors really, because they actually took us to the next level. And surprise, surprise, our results for last year were better than the results of the prior year. But I think what was a big lesson for us is this, what we call fail fast and learn fast. We were not scared to say this has not worked because of the uncertainties we started with, and we were saying, move on, try something new. So we are also learning very fast. And lastly, we learned how to make decisions with very few data points, because the reality is we didn't know what we didn't know. Nobody knew. And so we say, 50% data points are good enough for you to make a decision. Just make the decision, move on. And so big lessons for all of us as leaders, in the organization. Over.
Okay, thank you, David. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned that your results last year were better than the previous year. Now it's interesting what you're noticing, that while some businesses closed, others, they're still there, they're surviving. So I don't know, what would you say differentiates those businesses that actually crashed, they no longer exist, and those that are thriving today? David.
Yeah, so let me start by, sharing an observation which I think many of you, have seen. I mean, we know for sure that in the last 12 months alone, there are 56 new billionaires in the US, new billionaires. And the Billionaires Club, actually the US, has added another $637 billion US. In other words, they are richer by that amount. What does that mean? Of course, it's not the only indicator of the reality of organizations, doing well and individuals doing well. But what we've seen as a trend is that those organizations who have managed to survive, thrive, and are growing ahead of the curve have rethought, they had to rethink their strategies. They have had to rethink the organization design, creating flat organizations that are more nimble and agile. But I've seen, again, a number of them really rethinking their processes, their systems, workplaces, and workforces altogether. I talked about the shorter planning cycles, which really means you build in agility in your strategic planning, because the one-year strategy really does not help you much because of the unknowns and the unknowables. And so I see most of the organizations who have done well, really thinking short-term, but also prioritizing in a deeper way, and as well simplifying their processes like reporting. Doesn't make sense to insist on reporting, every week and every month and report to 100 stakeholders or board members. Just do what keep the lights on. And that's what organizations have done. But I've also seen a lot of innovation to the extent of creating contactless businesses. I think, Emily, you talk about what your challenge was, but I've also seen banks, I've seen even hospitals. I'm seeing many organizations, different sectors, innovating to really bring technology to cloud in a big way. And of course, that is where we've seen technology and talent meeting in a big way. I mean, think about how many organizations are using bots now, chatbots especially. But we've also seen organizations really bringing in not only more flexibility in the workplace, people allowed to work from wherever they can and, without being limited by space and time, and allowing people to do what they do best in a manner that suits them. So we've seen that happening a great deal. But very important, I've seen also people shifting from these hard-nosed targets set because we are chasing particular results, and have connected with the body, mind, and souls of the staff in terms of what's the purpose of the organization. It's very interesting to hear conversation in the corridors and the water coolers these days, wherever they are, people talking more about why our reason for existence as an organization. And I think organizations which are driving superior results and impact are those who have got the employees to experience what it means to contribute to the big purpose. And of course, I think Hedrick talked about communication. That is a core part of the employee communication, rather experience. But lastly, again, we also know there's been a lot of reskilling and upskilling teams to the extent of actually people not only being agile, in terms of their thinking and mindset, but also being able to do multiple things, especially in those self-organized cross-functional teams I talked about. So again, many things are happening out there, but these are some of the insights or the trends I've seen in high-performance organizations during the crisis.
Great, thanks, David. I think David has taken more of a business angle. Let's look at more the HR specifics. What would you say has been the differentiator of these types of businesses, those that are succeeding and those that are no longer existing, Hedrick?
In addition to what David has said, I just want to maybe emphasize agility, being able to quickly shift, you know, like the situation of a wheel inside a wheel. Can it move in any direction quickly at a really turn of a switch, really? It just rotates and moves. So I think agility is great. And then another thing I would like to add is seeing an opportunity in the crisis. So for example, COVID has happened. Are we just going to roll over and die? Or are we going to see what are my clients' needs? How do I meet these needs? Do I need to upskill myself so that I am able to effectively deal with the developing needs of the clients? So that's what I would like to just add to David's take.
Folake, would you like to go next?
All right. Again, not risking any duplication and repetition because of time. I think one of the things that certainly helped us, if you think about, if you remember when you are in the plane and they say to you, make sure that you put on your mask before you help the person who is actually right next to you. So it was, how do we take care of the people as well, and the people then of course includes HR in themselves, leadership. How do we help leadership be better? How do we help them be resilient? And what we started doing was coming up with wellness sessions. So we not only had wellness sessions for employees, even we in HR had to resort to wellness sessions. I've had quite a number of invitations within the business where it's just like, Folake, we're having a business review, but can you come talk about wellness? Can you come talk about how it's important to have a growth mindset, during this period? Can you just come talk about what should what we should do as a, in terms of, is it giving people, just directives, or is it having a coaching mindset and helping them to just get through, this particular, difficult, period. So it was really a lot of how to manage the flexibility that employees wanted, but at the same time, we needed them to be productive, within the work environment. The other thing, of course, apart from the, wellness and, really raising the mental agility, was also around, we were all at home. How do we keep collaborating, especially in a hybrid work environment? Believe it or not, whether you like it or not, we now want the best of both worlds. I can work at home confidently, but at the same time, I want connection with my colleagues. I want to see Janet. Janet is on the call. She's my colleague in Oracle, so I keep calling her name, But I want to see Janet. I want to gist by the water cooler. I only want to do that 2 to 3 times a week. No apologies. So how do I make sure that people can still collaborate, with wanting flexibility and still wanting connection? And therefore, what tools and innovations do I put in place? How do I get creative with Zoom? How do I use applications like Slack to create that ongoing collaboration, and perhaps ongoing co-opetition, because that's partly what also makes our business thrive. We are a sales organization on many levels, so how do we make sure that we keep going? So like David said, it's not just keeping the lights on, but how do we look internally to make sure that people stay productive, people stay mentally agile, people are connecting? Because after all, we are still talking about, human beings. And I think the last thing that I will say is, we don't even have time to wait for that process, that structure. that new way of working to be perfect. We have to do it now. So act and keep learning along the way. Nobody's expecting perfection right now. If anybody is, if your CEO is, then come on. I mean, is it really in touch with the times? So if you knew that you were going to give it 2 weeks, please tell them to give you 4 weeks this time. Why? Because now we're learning as we go along, we're evaluating as we go along, we're testing as we go along. Who is seeking perfection? Act, do, learn, come back, act, do, learn, and go on like that until the thing becomes perfect. And if it does not work, be the first to raise your hand to say, excuse me, we haven't been in a pandemic before. We've tested it. It hasn't worked. We're going back to the drawing board. And by the way, we're trying something new. Keep iterating the process. Keep emerging. Fall, rise. You know, Emily, like rise and learn. You know, rise, learn, fall, rise, learn. Don't be afraid of that cycle. We will get there, and we are getting there. Thank you.
Great, that's really inspiring and a really nice segue to get a bit more personal for you as leaders. What have been your own personal experiences? What have you learned? And maybe I can kick you off with that question. Because I was one of the, forgive my ignorance, but when they started talking about this pandemic and how long it's going to take, and then I think there was somebody who had even written online that this is going to be it's going to be 2 years, you people, you need to prepare. And I was like, these guys are haters. We are running a business. How do they expect that we will survive? And if you're not careful, you could easily have just paused and waited for it to go away. It did not go away. So I think what I learned is just to also balance between big dreams and reality, and also just being able to accept the situation, being able to learn what's going on around, and quickly shift to a next plan of action. And I think that made quite a big difference for me as a business leader, and also just appreciating the small things and the small wins, because otherwise you can go crazy. Running a business is tough in an environment where already it was difficult, especially from an economic point of view. And then now the pandemic made it worse. You have people depending on you, you have employees, you have a family that's dependent on you. So just also being kind to yourself and being able to just take it slowly and take it step by step. I think as a business owner, that has come through for me in big ways. And of course, leveraging on technology. Most of our clients were very anti programs that we offered that were online, and everybody said, no, we don't want this. But suddenly all of us had to learn. Suddenly all of us had to do this. And so for us, we very quickly started shifting and saying, what can we do differently? I did a few courses myself online, you know, and I challenged myself to do things a little bit differently. And I continue to use those skills today, even in what I'm doing. And you know what? Actually, we can never go back to what it was. So I think from a personal perspective, I also learned quite a bit. I went back to class to study things that would prepare me for the new environment today. And finally, just being human. And just don't forget that you're human. It doesn't matter what position you hold, in society, in your company, it doesn't matter. I think just maintaining that and letting people see that and letting people connect with that was so important during this time. So, who wants to go next?
I can go.
Okay.
So, yeah, I've picked several personal lessons, during the crisis management. But I think one which I call out, is really about the power of questioning. For the first time, I've become comfortable with not having all the answers, and instead ask questions, and even then asking questions not to get answers, but to empower the teams to go and explore all the possibilities. It is very strange because I think I and many of us on this call were wired to always go to our teams with the solutions and walk out with an agreement on what the results are going to look like. Now I realize actually it's not bad after all, not to have all the answers or any answers, and that actually, by the way, maybe you don't need the answers in the first instance at that point in time. And so I think I've perfected my art of questioning, and questioning not to make anybody uncomfortable, but actually to empower them. And I continue to grow and learn in that space, but it takes a lot of, emotional intelligence, but also I think contextual intelligence, because you realize that actually you're dealing with people in so many different contexts that there will never be one set of answers that respond to all the different realities. And so letting the reality sail through and, cease to be a control freak. I think that for me has been a really big lesson for me.
Thank you for being candid and sharing with us, David. Folake?
When David talks about being a control freak, and as a control freak, losing control means that you are certainly not in your elements. One of the personal lessons in this, especially being a coach, is the fact that you've got to be in touch with your own frailties. You've got to be in touch with your own shortcomings. And at some time, and at some point, I had to seek a coach. I had to seek a therapist to say, excuse me, am I okay? There were days I didn't want to get out of bed in the morning. There were days I was even like, the team, please guys, go even manage this. But how did I stay in control? I reached out for help. Like David said, I didn't have all the answers, but I did something about it. I found out what worked for me during the day, because my team was also looking up to me for answers. So what worked for me? Was it, am I okay just sitting down? I mean, I hardly try not to. I'm gonna give you a very practical example. It's important for me to get up and walk during the day and just, clear my head. So even when I can't do that, for example, I probably just go into another, I go into another room in the house, or, I stay outside and just get in some air. There are some calls. If I don't have to be on video, I take them on my AirPod and I walk, around. That started to work for me. Exercise and working out. It was not about losing weight, ladies and gentlemen. It was about maintaining my personal sanity. I needed to go somewhere, get all that, get the heart pumping and things like that. Just some form of distraction, especially when lockdown was over. It was really a breath of, fresh air, and like I said, maintaining positivity in my team meant that I definitely needed to stay, positive. So how did I stay positive? That's where I also keyed into my faith, my ways of staying positive in terms of prayers, in terms of affirmations, in terms of, scriptures. That's what helped me, because I needed to then be there for my team. But when everything seemed to be crumbling, I had to call for help. I had to do what was necessary. And then with my team, like I said, it was bringing a bit more of a human touch. I have team members who don't have spouses, who live alone, and therefore checking in on them, I sort of give them a bit of 110%, as opposed to what I gave others in terms of the checking in. So some of us may have had team members who even had COVID. We went to the extent sometimes of even calling family members just to show that solidarity, just to show that we care, where that was, allowed and permissible. But if we say we were if we say we were managing and making the rules with a human face, we needed to demonstrate that. So it was maybe a case of really looking in my arsenal to say, how do I keep going so that I can be there for the others? And this is not just about teams, this is about families. I have a 20-year-old, I had a 17-year-old. A lot of their outlet is with friends. They were going bonkers during the lockdown. And that means it was a way of how do we create the fun? How do we get together as a family so that you don't crumble in the office whilst the home front is crumbling as well. So there were definitely different things that we needed to that I needed to do and the personal lessons that I have learned along the way. And a lot of those have become best practices. So in terms of what worked, take that. In terms of what didn't work, okay, chuck that. And what exactly has then become best practice that you can keep on, again, perfecting, emerging, reiterating, and so on and so forth. All right, thank you.
Totally agree with you, Folake. Exercise is not usually all about weight loss. Sanity, very, very important. And I do think that when your sanity is in place, then you are able to exercise self-leadership well. And when your self-leadership is on point, then you're able to lead your team properly. Because if you're not aware of where you are, in which space you're operating in mentally, emotionally, then you will not be able to lead well. So yeah, I really agree with us, with that keeping your sanity in place, important. Another key point I learned was now more than ever, the employee is very, very important. And the employee needs to feel that you're adding personal value to them as an individual and to the people they love. As Folake says, check in on them. How are you doing? Your husband was unwell, your child was unwell. How is it now? Your mother hasn't been too well. How are you doing? I found that very important, and it just helps to keep them, for employees, all the stakeholders really engaged, committed. And of course, when that happens, it's a better environment to work in. And something else has to do with leadership. I figured out that leadership, we don't have to wait for a crisis to put on the crisis hat to lead. You must have that awareness in your mind constantly that a crisis can happen. So in your mind, have the full vision. How will it go if it doesn't go this way? I need to see beneath, I need to see above, I need to have the full circular vision. So I've got to see that as a leader, that is critical. Don't just have one thing, as David said, be ready, it might change, adjust, be flexible, and work with it so it goes, let it flow with it.
Lovely, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm seeing a lot of chats as well, a lot of engagements. Fatuma says, I agree, communication part, we don't expect perfection. Gladys resonates with the personal sanity, don't we all? And the power of questioning is spot on, as David mentioned earlier on. And of course, Vuya says emotional intelligence is key in managing self and teams. Maxwell, I agree 100%, to the ability to be vulnerable and acutely self-aware of your limitations and strengths as a leader is critical in managing through crisis. Gibson, yes, family and friends are key. And then, yeah, that is it. Thank you so much for your contributions. And you can also type in your questions. By the way, we are closing. We are almost closing. This is going to be the last question. In closing, if you can respond to it and also maybe sharing your final remarks alongside with that, that would be great. How do you think the experience over the last 2 years will change how we lead people?
Yeah, so Folake, do you want to go first?
I yield the mic to you, David. Please go ahead.
All right. So first of all, I think you could look at this crisis as a problem to solve, but you can also look at it as an opportunity to seize. Why I say so is that we've actually come to find out that there are a lot of processes we've been carrying along and we're excited about, love them to death. And now we realize that actually they were not adding value at all to the organizations or to the productivity and the effectiveness of our teams. And you can start interrogating process one by one. Look at our performance management processes. What were we thinking designing such performance management processes? They're absolutely useless. In fact, at this point where you were not in control of anything, you couldn't even see your employees, you didn't know where they were, whether they're even working or not. What kind of process would really be fit for purpose going into a future virtual or hybrid workplace? And I think we need just to be honest with ourselves as HR professionals and say, half of the processes we have are useless. The problem is we don't know which half. And then go in one by one and just challenge it to the extent of saying, do we need it or not? If not, throw it out of the window. So I think we've been too comfortable with the way we used to do things in the past that we never really thought we could innovate around how we get, our employees to actually be themselves, In fact, it's not about to be, but being, allowing the employees to be, and I think this is what is enabled most of our organizations to survive. And I think I would, love to hear from everybody else about what are they saying around our HR processes.
I think, Emily, I'm definitely looking forward to the questions, that some may have around this, just to make this a bit more robust, But like I said earlier, welcome to the new era. The workplace has changed, working has changed, and the workforce, has changed as well. And again, this is really about managing the hybrid paradox. You have to manage flexibility, and you have to manage, again, how people connect. If we can innovate in those two ways, I think that we actually really start to really address the issue of really leading in the time of crisis. The other one, of course, is reevaluating work and the way work is managed by managers / leaders, by executive teams and so on and so forth. How is work managed now? Yes, we used to give directives. Yes, we used to be more instructive, and there's a place for that. However, as leaders, we also need to be more curious. We need to look at a different way of managing. We need to start to model the kind of behaviors that we want to see, especially when it comes to that hybrid working. Because we still need to remain, we still need to remain productive, and we still need to deliver, shareholder value. But what kind of management practices can we adopt to make sure that even in the KPIs of the managers and appraisal period, we're asking, how did you help your team during this pandemic? How did you model? How did you show care? How did you bring about a growth mindset? How did you coach, during this, period? And of course, it's really helping employees continue to feel that, connection, yet making them comfortable that, okay, with the great reshuffle, which is really about redefining work and the work environment, how are we really helping them to stay productive? So it is really looking about what works for you. And this is not a time to be shy from competition. Competition should in fact be your friend. You should all be getting together. We all talk. Microsoft, what are you doing? SAP, what's going on? IBM, what are you guys doing? About this. Maybe this is the time that we can learn from one another and keep that, collaboration, or not just internally, but in terms of our network, to try again in terms of really, what works. So first thing, how do we make sure that we drive productivity with tools and innovation? How do we manage the new working, called the new working paradox? And how do we ensure that we help managers and leaders navigate the new world of work with empathy, with modeling the right behavior, and then of course, breeding that confidence and productivity with employees. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Folake. Let me read a question on the chat before we hear from Hedrick, so we can think about it as she speaks to. Will experience change staff employment contracts as we look at a future with hybrid contracts, partly in the office, partly working from home? This is from George Osoro. So let's think through that. Let's hear from Hedrick, and then any of you can respond to that.
For me, my take is one of the emerging issues that is really big is mental wellness. As one of us mentioned earlier, those who, while especially working from home, some live alone, So it really is a challenge, and it is something we need to bear in mind. So going forward, that is something that we need to encourage. In our organization, what we have done is that we have included it really big now in our medical cover. The leaders are keen to pick out cues of somebody who might be needing something like this, and we encourage, like, take time out, see so-and-so, talk to somebody, get help, feel better. So I think this is something that is really great for me. Going forward, it is something that we need to keep looking at. Then another learning for me is we need very strong stakeholder collaboration at all times to go anywhere. With regard to the pandemic, for example, people needed to collaborate, the leaders needed to work together, leaders needed to work as a team so that we can move forward. And obviously, decision-making, we can't take too long thinking about something. We need to be fast, know that this is the way we are going, and respond so that we move with the times. Thank you.
Thank you, Hedrick. David, do you want to respond to that question?
Yes, and there, you know, yeah, and I'm speaking from what is actually happening in my world at the moment. So, first of all, again, I talk about opportunities out of a crisis. We had, you know, traditionally limited ourselves to hiring in countries where we had legal entities. I can tell you that over the pandemic, I now have been able to get super talents, you know, in India, in somebody's based in Korea, somebody in the UK, Spain, Canada. And what's the arrangement? Because the question is about contracts. I'm contracting with them as consultants, but definitely fully dedicated to us. And they manage their arrangements, they manage their taxes, they manage everything. But the thing is, I'm now able to confidently tweak my talent strategy to be able to crowd in resources from anywhere in the world confidently, and it's working. And so, of course, you tweak the contracts to make it really fit for purpose, depending on where they are and what issues they have to deal with. But that is a new reality of the world of work. But the second thing also is, and this I'm seeing with a few other organizations I've been associating with, you know, the shift from guaranteed pay to variable pay, because especially with the gig arrangement that is now becoming part of the new normal, individuals are actually saying, especially the millennials, they're actually saying, you know what, just pay me, reward me for what I'll bring. Don't ask me how many hours I put in. Don't ask me where I work from. Just tell me, what do you want? I give it to you. You pay me my money, I walk away. The more I hunt, the more I eat. So that is coming into the contract design.
Thanks, David. I think that's really well answered. Maybe at this point, I'll hand over to Eva to close the session for us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a very, very insightful conversation. And thank you to the speakers for your candidness in sharing your personal experiences. I think you've really understood what we're trying to do with this platform, and we hope to have you again on our future webinars and seminars under the AmCham HR Clinic. I think for me, what I've really taken out of this is agility, flexibility, and being okay with not doing what you always used to do. I think, you know, part of being human is that we're used to our usual processes. You know, everybody has, for instance, what they do in the morning before they go to work. You know, they have a certain set of activities they do before they can say they can start their day. And what COVID did is essentially disrupted that in all manner and form in our lives. And being okay with that and learning a new way of doing things, I think, is what really came out strongly for me. And organizations that embrace that are the ones that we have thriving today. So thank you very much. Thank you to the participants on the call today and for your engagements in the chat. We have a fantastic opportunity that has been offered by Rise and Learn for our AmCham members looking to have 1 hour consultation just to get in touch with some of the processes that you have in your HR, seek guidance. Please feel free to reach out to me and I'll connect you with Emily and her team. who will be providing a 1-hour free session for your organization as AmCham members. So with that, thank you very much to the speakers. Thank you, everyone. And we have come to the end of the session. I will put my email in the chat box. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Asante sana. Have a good day.